Hi, I'm Erik Hall, the digital sports editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I'm joined by John Rawlings, who was APSE president in 1990-91 while sports editor at the San Jose Mercury News, and then also editor at the Sporting News. Thanks for joining me, John.
Happy to do it, Erik.
How'd you get involved with APSE?
I was the sports editor at the Columbia Missourian in 1974, when the first APSE meeting was held in Kansas City. And I really didn't know what APSE was, but I knew if there were a bunch of big time sports editors hanging out, that it would be a good place to be. And that was my first exposure to APSE. I soaked it up. I can remember Ed Storin was there, Dave Smith was there, Vince Doria, George Solomon, people that I really looked up to. So that was my first meeting, APSE meeting. And then, of course, later when I was at the Mercury News, I was fortunate to become very involved. And I think I know APSE has done a lot for our business and did a lot for me.
What are some of your memories of that conference out there in Kansas City?
Just the people, those names that I remember. I can't tell you anything that was on the agenda. I don't know whether there were conferences, meetings like are done today or not. And I'm not even sure really how I found out that APSE was meeting. So that was more than a couple of weeks ago. So those memories are pretty foggy.
You talked about moving up into the leadership once you were at the San Jose paper. How did that work out, and how did you get in the position to be able to move up in the organization?
I was eager to be a member, eager to do things. I was asked early on. I was asked to be on some committee. I don't remember who asked, nor do I remember what the committee was, but I remember diving in. I remember going to contest meetings. Those were back in the days when everybody got together, usually in Tampa, and we hunkered down for 3 or 4 days and read until our eyeballs fell out. I was always eager to do that, and you mix with people, and I was happy to do anything that I could that was helpful.
When you're in leadership, putting on a conference is one of the things you're responsible for. What was your approach to putting on conferences while you were in leadership for APSE?
To pass off as much of the work to other people as I could. I say that only partly joking, because one of the things that was hard for me to learn when I became a sports editor is to delegate. I was pretty good at a certain set of skills that got me to the job that I was in, but I had to give those skills up because I had other things to do. And so I did. That was part of my learning to delegate, to lean on other people, to trust that when they said this will get done, that it'll get done. And so in the conferences, the regional conferences were really important because it gave sports editors who might not be able to make it to our national meeting a chance to be around fellow sports editors. We worked really hard at putting on good nuts and bolts conferences. How to copy edit. Ken Finkel, a name that many people will recognize, was kind of the guru of copy editing among sports types. He must have appeared in every region in the country to do copy editing, and we would do reporting, and we would do writing, we would do interviewing, we would do some management types of classes, and those were the things that I hope I worked hardest on, because they would have the broadest effect.
Were there any challenges that you particularly remember, or high points you particularly remember from the conferences that you were involved with putting on?
Well, the only challenges were the bylaws and the contests. Other than that, everything was easy. My guess is that there's still lots of discussion about the contests and what is fair in terms of how people are judged. We wrestled with a lot of issues, and I am pretty sure that sometime in the early to mid 80s is when APSE started its annual meetings with the commissioners. And that was, on a national level, I think one of the biggest contributions that APSE made to our industry, because we had the ears of the leaders of the sports that we covered. And it was a chance to share our concerns, hear the concerns from the administration of the sports. And I never had anything to do with putting those on. I went one year, and I just thought that they were really valuable and an indication of the kind of things that we could do. And remember, we were modeled after the AP Editors Association, the name of which escapes me at the moment. But we tried to emulate the good things that were done in those settings and apply them to sports.
I think you were referencing APME, the AP
Thank you.
Editors Association.
APME. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. What do you think were some of the accomplishments from your time as APSE president, and what are you most proud of?
I got to tell you the truth. Other than putting on what I thought was a good national conference at the end of my presidency, that's the thing that I remember the most. A lot of the stuff has kind of gone into the ether over the years. And that was, I switched jobs, as you mentioned. Shortly after I was elected president, I left the Mercury News and went to the Sporting News. And there was an awful lot of groundwork that needed to be done at the Sporting News. And so really, the most of what got done that year was done by the other officers.
I loved, I was doing some research for this, and I loved the quote you had about your time at the Sporting News. This was in a profile in St. Louis Magazine. You were quoted as competing. This was about competing against Sports Illustrated and ESPN, the magazine. You said, if you can't be the Navy, you better be darn good pirates. How much of that quote embodied kind of your approach as a sports editor?
Well, let me first say that's not original to me.
Okay.
I don't know who said it first, but I thought it aptly described, and that was kind of the situation we were in San Jose, because we wanted to compete with the San Francisco Chronicle and the San Francisco Examiner for covering sports in the Bay Area. And I think we did that quite respectably. And then, of course, at sporting news, ESPN was bigger than we were. Sports Illustrated was bigger than we were. So we had to find ways that we could be relevant to readers without being a carbon copy of those other sports companies.
Yeah. Was it difficult? I don't know if that's the right word, but like, how was it balancing the role with APSE with your sports editor role?
It was not easy because you could spend as many hours a week as you wanted to working on APSE issues. But, you know, you've got your full-time job over here, and you better kind of be paying attention to that. So there were time crunches, but also the energy that I would get, the relationships that I built. To this day, I'm still on a little email chain with Steve Doyle, Jeff Wohler, and Dale By. All three people that I met through APSE who became very, very dear friends. We've supported each other. We've applied. Steve Doyle just took a new job. Great responsibility. And we're all thrilled for him and his success. Not surprised. But those are the things that I remember most, the relationships that were made.
Yeah, that definitely seems to highlight like kind of the personal relationships you built in the organization. Do you want to talk some about or elaborate more about what APSE meant to you personally?
I got a lot more out of it than I put into it. I know that. From, you know, part of it was being in those small working groups that we would have at regional meetings, and then at the national conference we had them as well. There were a lot of friendships made during the contest judging weeks, and we would wrangle about what the right circulation breakdown was for the categories in the contest. We would wrangle over which sections were in the top 10 for daily, the top 10 for Sunday. And anybody who said that they could sit in those meetings if you were judging sections, we did our best to not have you judge your own size paper. But sometimes you fell into odd situations, and you couldn't help but have some internal bias. And of course, even though on the writing stories, on the writing samples that were sent in for the contest, you clip the story out of the paper. And this is my recollection, without any markings about the origin of the story. But if you're reading one of those stories, you know what your own newspaper looks like in print. So you had to try to separate yourself there. And those weeks together of having 5 or 6 guys in a hotel room with either sections or writing samples strewn all over, and talking about, was this one better than this one? Was that one better than that one? And I will tell you, I still remember reading, I don't remember, this may have been breaking news category one year, and read a story about Dwight Gooden's first start as a New York Met. And I read this story, and it was just breathtaking. It was so good. And I couldn't wait to find out who wrote that story. And it was some guy named Verducci that I had never heard of. And I think he turned out to be maybe pretty good in our business. Those are the kind of things that stick with you. And I was happy years later to get a chance to become friends with Tom and tell him about that experience and how blown away I was by that single piece of work and how I predicted where he would end up.
You got a pretty good eye for talent then, for sure.
Actually, if you don't mind my taking this off on a little bit of a tangent, that was one of the things that we talked a lot about in both national and regional conferences was how to interview, how to hire. And of course, there was a network, and sports journalists are a pretty tight circle. So you were never more than two people away from being able to get a reference on some person you had never met, because somebody knows somebody who knows that guy or woman. And just all of those things. And I think if somebody asked me what I did best, it was hiring. And Lord knows, in my years, I did a lot of hiring. Most of them were good, and only one of all the people I hired ended up in jail.
That's dubious distinction for that one person.
Yeah, that's a story for another day. And
it sounds like we talked about the personal side, but the stories you've told, like you got a lot out of professionally from APSE as well. It sounds like from both the judging and the conferences.
I did.
What advice would you have for future presidents of APSE?
Listen. I think I developed into being a good listener, but I was, 33 or 34 when I became sports editor at the Mercury News, and listening might not have been one of the things I did real well, because, hey, I knew what I was doing. I didn't need to listen to anybody. So I think that's really important, to listen, to collaborate, to make yourself part of the newsroom, not apart from the newsroom. And to tell you the truth, Eric, I don't know how much of a struggle that continues to be now. But in the 70s and 80s, it was a really important issue for us. And that's one of the things you got to remember, that we're doing journalism. Happens to be in the specialized field of sports, but it could be a business or any number of other issues. But we're journalists first and interested in sports second.
Yeah. Yep. Any other particular memories or that stand out to you from your time with APSE, or anything else you want to share?
All the national conferences were good. One that I remember very well was in Portland in June of 1989. And I'm able to remember that because our first son was born in April of 89. And my wife and I toted him around the convention, acting like we were the first people in the world to have a child. But the conference was, I thought, really well done. Jeff did a great job of setting it up. And, you know, that we had one of our conferences in Orlando that was really good. Those are the kind of things where you're put together with your peers and working on common either problems or common goals.
Yeah, I remember Jeff talking about the Portland conference. I think he said he got some IndyCar drivers to come to that.
He may well have. That part I don't remember.
And I think the Orlando one you're talking about, it looks like it would have been in 1987. So
that sounds about right. Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
Well, I am mostly retired, although after I left the sporting news and I became a pastor. So I'm a part-time pastor. I lead a very small congregation in First Presbyterian Church in Perryville, Missouri. And I've said to people, not everyone has a chance to have one career that he loves. And I've had two careers that I love. So I'm really, really fortunate with the people I've met along the way and the way I've been influenced, the way people looked after me. So I'll do that for, I don't know, another few years, and then maybe I'll just kick up and not do anything. Chase after my grandkids.
That sounds like a pretty good second career you're enjoying.
It is.
Well, unless there's anything else you want to add, thank you so much for your time, John. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate doing it, and I hope that everyone who's involved in APSE can get as much out of it in his or her way as I was able to get for myself.
Thanks, John.